All right, I think we're going to begin. Thank you very much for being here. We're very excited to have you at our panel for Healing and Hope, the challenges of addiction. And we're going to begin with a prayer, and then I will go over the course of the morning with Father Hoar.
Good morning. Let us remember we're in God's holy presence and bow our heads in prayer. Almighty and gracious God, we come before you mindful of our need for your healing, redeeming, and loving grace in our lives, in our ministries, in our work. We ask you to pour forth your grace into our hearts this day. Lead us and guide us. Open our minds to the wonder of your love and the needs of your people, so that we may be instruments of healing grace to all we encounter. I ask you to bless this university and bless our gathering this day. Fill us with the gift of hope. Deepen our faith and help us to be ministers and vessels of charity, especially for those who are struggling with addiction, those who are alienated from you, from themselves, and from your people. For we ask this as we ask all things in the name and through the power and grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, our Savior and Redeemer, for he lives and reigns forever and ever. Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception, pray for us. St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, pray for us.
Thank you very much. So for those of you who don't know me, everyone over here knows me. My name is Mary Landrio, and on behalf of the Academy for Nature and Nurture, I welcome you today. I just want to briefly thank the people who have been involved in this panel. It is co-sponsored by the Institute of Neuroimmunopharmacology, so we want to thank our co-sponsors, as well as the Academy for Nature and Nurture. The Academy has 4 full-time faculty members who are a part of it, interdisciplinary. Suli Chang, who unfortunately couldn't be here together. We're all kind of doing other conferences. Dr. Jose Lopez, as well as Father Joe Laracy, and myself, Mary Landrio. So we are the faculty members of this interdisciplinary academy sponsored by the Provost for Nature and Nurture. We also have 3, we're fortunate to have 3 graduate students who are a part of the academy, who, in addition to their own disciplinary studies, getting masters, are also part of the academy and are doing research, as well as having an opportunity to do experiential learning at Morgan's agency, Prevention Links, which she will talk about. So we're grateful for that opportunity for our students. And one of our students, John, is here. The other is Carla Becht, and the other is Luke Fuller. So we're grateful for their participation as well. Also want to thank the Provost's office for sponsoring us and for being a part of this event. So here's what we're doing this morning. We're going to have, fortunate to have 2 panelists, Morgan Thompson and Dr. Hoar. Morgan will speak first for about 20 minutes. Then Dr. Hoar, Father Hoar will speak for about 20 minutes. We'll have about 20 minutes of question between the 2 of them, and then we'll have about 20 minutes for questions from you. And then we will have some lunch. So that's the day, all right? Or the morning. So it's my honor to introduce Morgan Thompson. Morgan is a person in long-term recovery, and she's also the CEO of Prevention Links, a nonprofit organization focused on preventing the development of substance abuse disorders and supporting individuals in their recovery journey across the lifespan. In her capacity as CEO at Prevention Links, Ms. Thompson has spearheaded and developed and implemented a number of innovative programs designed to promote health literacy, wellness, and resiliency for individuals impacted by substance use disorders and their families. Ms. Thompson was instrumental in the launch of the first New Jersey Raymond J. Lesniak Experience, Strength, and Hope Recovery High School, 3 peer recovery community centers, peer outreach support services, and the New Jersey Coalition for Addiction Recovery Support, a statewide recovery community organization focused on expanding the availability and quality of recovery support services across the state. Outside of her role at Prevention Links, Ms. Thompson serves on the board of directors of the National Association of Recovery Schools and coordinates advocacy efforts for the association. She is a certified trainer of the Kinetic Community for Addiction and Recovery Coach Academy, the Lemire Group's Harm Reduction, a recovery coaching pathway, and has developed a variety of continuing education trainings for social workers, peer recovery specialists, and other professionals, training more than 500 professionals annually. Ms. Thompson is proud to serve as a member of the New Jersey Opioid Remediation and Recovery Advisory Council, appointed by Governor Murphy. She's also a friend and a colleague, and I'm very honored that she's willing to spend her day with us today. So I'd like to first introduce you to Morgan Thompson.
Nothing more excruciating than hearing your bio read, especially when it's that long. I should have shortened it. Apologies. But good morning. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you, and wonderful to see some familiar faces. This is a topic, as you can tell, that is very important to me, both professionally and personally as a person in long-term recovery from substance use disorder. I do have a few slides. I'm going to go through them kind of quickly because we have a robust dialogue ahead of us. But I did just want to do some setting the stage for why the work that we're here to talk about today is so important, and I'm sure this is not news to any of you. So pretty much at this point, we've all heard, whether on the news, in our coursework, or been personally impacted by the opioid crisis and the broader addiction crisis here in New Jersey and across the United States. According to the CDC, this process really, or this epidemic really unfolded in 3 distinct waves, although we know that addiction has been a problem that has plagued our society as long as there's been society, right? It's gone back millennia, but we're here to talk about a very specific window of time, and so that being the current opioid crisis here in the US. So in the early 90s and into the early 2000s, we saw a rise in overdose deaths related to prescription opioids, and that was related to actions taken by certain manufacturing pharmaceutical companies, manufacturers of pharmaceuticals, marketers of pharmaceuticals, as well as some doctors who were engaging in practices that were not in the best interest of their patients, that really downplayed the risks associated with these drugs, and overpromised the pain relief that people could experience. And as a result of that, many individuals became addicted to prescription opioids. When some of this began to come to light, some of the, in many cases, illegal actions that were being taken by these companies, there was a real a lot of legal action and actions taken to limit the supply of prescription opioids. And so many doctors, fearing malpractice and other sorts of issues, stopped prescribing, or for a variety of other reasons, individuals who were already dependent on opioids could no longer access them. So that is where we look at phase 2, where there was a rise in heroin overdose deaths, where many people who had become addicted to prescription opioids moved on to the illicit street drug of heroin because it's chemically very similar, can relieve the withdrawal symptoms that people experience and create that euphoric effect that people addicted to opioids seek. And so during that time, there was a sharp rise in heroin overdose deaths. And even as actions were taken to address that crisis and to stem the tide of overdose deaths, fentanyl, a very potent synthetic opioid, started to be seen more and more in the illicit drug supply, and that contributed to the very sharp rise in overdose deaths that we saw around 2015, 2016, to the point that today there are more than 100,000 overdose deaths in the United States every year. And so just to give you a sense, morphine was the typical, prior to the introduction of OxyContin, kind of the standard, and still, in many cases, here in the U.S. and around the world, the standard treatment for pain management. Heroin is more potent, about twice as potent. Fentanyl is 100 times more potent. And there is carfentanil, which is rarely seen, thank goodness, in the drug supply, but it is 10,000 times more potent than morphine, and almost always results in immediate overdose death. So really lethal drug supply that we're seeing now. There's also new adulterants in the drug supply all the time. Most recently, something called xylazine, also known as tranq or tranq dope. And while it doesn't necessarily contribute to more overdose deaths, it has some really dramatic public health concerns. It can cause large wounds, very serious wounds on the user's body. So it's of great concern across the board, all these adulterants. The other alarming trend as it relates to the drug supply is that fentanyl is not just in heroin at this point. It's seen in pretty much every illicit drug, especially cocaine, stimulants. And so if you think about it, those are very different drugs that acts on the body in a very different way. So someone who uses cocaine or, MDMA or recreational, as we often are told to think about them, drugs, they don't have any tolerance for opioids. So someone who thinks they're using, let's say, MDMA or cocaine, not knowing that there's fentanyl in it, is very likely to experience a fatal overdose. So there are things that work in terms of a public health approach to addressing the opioid crisis, and we're going to talk about what they are. And I wanted to talk about the fact that here in New Jersey, we have seen some progress as a result of the programs and services that I'm going to talk about today, but we haven't seen enough progress, and that progress has disproportionately benefited certain groups. So the statistics I showed you earlier were national. This is here in New Jersey, and you can see that while there is a modest decline in overdose deaths across the board, there's a continued increase among the Black and Hispanic population, and that is really a result of, again, programs, policies, services that disproportionately benefit white people, that disproportionately are accessible to white communities, and therefore are not culturally responsive in the ways that we need them to be. We need more programs and services that prioritize Black and brown communities if we're going to say we're making any progress in addressing the opioid crisis here in New Jersey. So quickly about prevention. So oftentimes when we're talking about opioids, we feel like, okay, we're kind of past the prevention part, but we're not. Truly, we're not. Prevention and efforts to stop addiction before it starts are actually very effective. Most people who develop an opioid use disorder have some history of using another substance earlier in life. So that's why a lot of times we focus a lot on young people when we talk about prevention efforts. So prevention focuses now a lot on risk and protective factors. So how do we reduce those factors that we know contribute to the development of a substance use disorder later in life, like early onset use, like traumatic events in childhood, adverse childhood experiences, and those community level factors, community safety, social norms within someone's community. All of this contributes to whether or not someone is likely to develop an addiction. But on the flip side of that, we can enhance protective factors. Sometimes we can't change the fact that a person is living in poverty, at least not as their counselor, right? We can connect them to resources, but we can't take away that life circumstance. But what we can do is connect them with protective factors. We can help them to develop their own positive norms, positive peer relationships, factors that really can lessen the impact of those risk factors that may exist for the young person. There's really been a transformation in the way we approach prevention over the last 20, 30 years. Some of you sitting here today may have been a part of drug prevention programs in your schools that were not effective and that were largely stigmatizing. So the just say no rhetoric we've kind of moved on from. We know that it doesn't work. There's lots of data to support the fact that it doesn't work. It's about as effective as preventing pregnancy by saying just don't have sex. Yes, that's a foundational component, but there's a lot of other strategies in order to truly promote positive health outcomes for young people. So we've moved away from that and towards health literacy, peer leadership, empowerment models that really help young people to make informed choices about how they do or don't engage with substances, that increase the likelihood that that their use will not become problematic if they engage in use at all. We also really emphasize early screening and intervention. Oftentimes, by the time someone's having a conversation with a young person about their use, it's become a criminal legal issue, it's become an academic issue that they may or may not be able to remain in school, and so that it casts a light overall on youth with substance use challenges as having a character deficiency of some kind. But we know that that's not the case, and we know that often the use predates some of those challenges that they're facing. And so if we're able to normalize conversations about use early on, if we're able to have, again, respectful, positive, conversations with young people in the doctor's office, at school, starting from a young age, they're more likely to come forward and say, yes, I've been experimenting, or no, I haven't. And so we can reinforce positive behaviors, and we can link to resources where negative behaviors may be occurring. And also, we wait too long to treat. Usually youth who get treated for a substance use disorder, it's at the most severe point. So really being able to have those early interventions available to young people is vital. There's also community coalitions that exist around the country. They're in every county. Here in New Jersey, there's information on the back table about the Union County Prevention Hub. That's the one that our organization operates, but there is a prevention hub in every county, and they offer a variety of resources related to substance use prevention, linkage to resources, and that's a big piece of the work that prevention does here in New Jersey, and why it's been effective. Access to information, enhancing skills, but also looking at the policies, the things like the built environment. Is there sufficient lighting in a community to promote more public safety? Is there a large density of liquor and cannabis outlets in a small area? These are all factors that can contribute to whether or not youth engage in use. And these changes to the way we approach prevention have really been fueled by a broader conversation around public health. And how do we start to treat substance use disorder as the public health issue that it is, rather than a criminal issue, a moral failing, or anything like that. So when we look at addiction from a public health lens, we have to look at a chronic disease model. We have to look at meeting people where they are. Some of you, especially the social workers in the group, may be familiar with the stages of change. I bet you didn't think you were going to see a cute chick in this presentation. It's like a little added bonus. This is from the Recovery Research Institute. They know how to make this information very accessible. But pre-contemplation and contemplation, we've all tried to make a change, right? We want something to be different in our behavior. Maybe it's we want to exercise, we want to sleep better, we want to drink less caffeine, we want to quit smoking. It's not always related to substance use. But we know that inner turmoil of knowing that we want to change but not quite being ready to do it. That's a lot of what happens in the contemplative stage. And so during that time, when someone is not ready to make changes in their use, there's a lot we can do to promote their health and safety. And this is practices like access to clean syringes, to sterile syringes if someone is injecting drugs, access to testing strips. So I mentioned before that fentanyl is in the drug supply in a really prevalent way. Educating and empowering people to test their drugs, to know what they're using, and to be able to take precautions to protect themselves is another strategy. And of course, naloxone, which I'll talk about in a moment, overdose prevention, drugs and other overdose prevention strategies are vital. When someone is in the preparation and action stage, they might be open to some type of help. That's where counseling, clinical interventions, treatment, medications can be very effective in moving someone towards a place of greater stability and supporting the changes that they want to make. And then long-term recovery or maintenance, helping people to sustain the changes that they have. This is the full continuum of needs that a person dealing with a substance use challenge will have. So I mentioned naloxone. Please, if you do one thing before you leave here, grab one of these cards. Very important. So naloxone is the overdose reversal drug. When someone is overdosing, if it's administered typically intranasally, it will restore normal breathing, so they are less likely to experience a fatal overdose. We need to keep people alive if there's any hope that they're going to recover. Naloxone has been the #1 tool in our fight here in New Jersey against the opioid crisis. So The state of New Jersey has taken a really bold step to make naloxone universally accessible. So you can walk into participating pharmacies around the state, go to the pharmacy counter, ask for naloxone. They will give it to you without asking for payment, without asking for insurance, without asking for ID. There's a QR code on these cards here, and that will tell you where the participating pharmacies in your area are. So really want to encourage you. The Surgeon General, back in 2016, said that every person in the United States should carry naloxone on them, because you never know when you're going to walk into a public restroom, when you're going to see someone pulled over on the side of the road, and you have an opportunity to save someone's life. There are Good Samaritan protections when you administer naloxone. It's very important that as many people as possible know and can access this life-saving resource. So that, when we talk about public health, that's just the baseline. But when we talk about treating substance use disorder as a long-term chronic condition that occurs across the lifespan, and we really look at what it takes for someone to achieve sustained remission, what the data tells us is that it takes a long time, and it takes multiple attempts, and sometimes those attempts are on my own. I'm gonna quit today, I'm gonna stop, I'm just gonna cold turkey it, as some say. I'm gonna go to a support group in the community. When that doesn't work, it works for many people, let's first say that. Actually, a lot of people, it's called natural recovery, find recovery without formal treatment, and that may or may not look like abstinence. That may look like a pattern of use that doesn't cause problems for them. It might be no longer using opioids, but I do drink. That looks different for every person. For others, those self-initiated attempts don't work, they're not successful, and so they move on to formal help seeking. Therapy, residential treatment, outpatient treatment, and other types of programs. Most people have multiple treatment attempts before they find sustained recovery. And the risk of a return to problematic use doesn't actually drop to the level that a normal person, the risk of substance use for a normal person, until about 5 years into the recovery journey. So what that tells us is we need to be providing supports and services for a long time after someone leaves formal treatment. Not always the case. However, in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a real push to make those long-term recovery support services more accessible and to reshape the way we think about addressing substance use disorder to a recovery-oriented system of care. There was a fantastic report in 2016 by the Surgeon General. He was our Surgeon General then, he's our Surgeon General again now. There were a few others in between, but Dr. Murthy had a wonderful report on facing addiction in America that highlighted the recovery-oriented system of care model as a vital component of moving towards recovery as a nation from the addiction crisis. And so it's moving towards person-centered models that are long-term, that bring the reality of recovery into the light. So often we see the painful side of addiction in the public eye. We see the celebrity who went into treatment and was doing great and now they're not, and the sensationalism around that. Or we see the statistics like the ones I showed you, but we don't hear a lot about people living in recovery and thriving because it's a very personal and oftentimes private journey, and there's still so much stigma that people face that causes them to hesitate before they speak publicly about their recovery. So a recovery-oriented system of care focuses not just on the services, but on the policies that normalize recovery and that incentivize acceptance of recovery and celebration of recovery in the workplace, in schools, in communities, in government. Even the government itself has made efforts to become a recovery-friendly employer in the last several years. So a lot of good change and hope, a lot of reason to hope with some of the changes that we're seeing in the systems. So when we talk about recovery, I know I'm running out of time, I apologize. There are some guiding principles, I won't go through all of them, but just want to really highlight this idea that there are many pathways of recovery. So that means that, people find recovery in different ways. Like I said, some of them are able to find it by just stopping, drawing on the organic supports in their life, their family, their friends, their loved ones. Some find recovery through a community of faith. Some find recovery through formal treatment, or a combination of all of these. Some people maintain their recovery with assistance with medications, FDA-approved medications that really can promote a lot of stability in a person's life. Some people sustain their recovery through a 12-step program like Alcoholics Anonymous, which all of us have probably heard of, but may not know a lot about what that is. It works for many people. It's very helpful for many people. Some people it doesn't resonate with at all. And so there are every day more and more new recovery support programs that are coming out, some that are based in various forms of mindfulness and different religions and culturally specific recovery support groups. So there's a lot of options out there for people, and there are more all the time. So we need to raise up and make sure people are aware of the variety of recovery support programming that's out there. And recovery happens around 4 major dimensions, and this, it seems obvious, but you can't have recovery if you don't have some support in these 4 areas. Sustainable recovery, recovery that promotes stability. So health, physical health. So often people who stop using substances face stigma and discrimination in the medical system still, or they just don't have the information and resources to engage in preventive care the way they need to. And so health outcomes for people in recovery, even though they've made this incredible positive change around their use, oftentimes are not as good as the general public. And of course, for someone who has used substances for a number of years, there are a variety of health issues that may come along with that. And so physical health, mental health, all of it is vital, and an integrated approach to health is vital to support an individual in recovery. Having a safe place to call home. I was having a conversation with one of the colleagues here about the unhoused population and how difficult it is to, it's like a chicken and the egg. Do we help get someone housed and then the recovery will start? Do they have to find recovery and then they can, find stable housing? It can be very difficult. Now, the data does show that putting housing first as a basic human right does increase the likelihood that someone will be able to either, find recovery or move towards stability. So having, again, a safe, supportive place to live is a vital component. Having a sense of purpose. And for some, that may be volunteering, that might be going to school, that may be working. All of these that we take for granted, right? Maybe in some cases, I know for me, it's always a privilege to be able to get up and go to work in the morning, but some days it's like, oh man. But truly, when you're in recovery, being able to, have a job that gives you a sense of meaning and purpose is really important to that sense of stability. And then community. Community is everything. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen the TED Talk by Johann Hari, The Opposite of Addiction is Connection. And again, that looks different for different people. For many, the pathway of recovery that they're on is their community, whether that's their AA community, their recovery community center community, connection with a peer recovery specialist. These are all places where people find community in recovery. So I mentioned peer support. In case you're not familiar, I just want to tell you a little bit about peer recovery specialists. Here in New Jersey, this is a new concept. We've only had certified peer recovery specialists for addiction recovery since about 2015, 2016. So it's an emerging workforce here. But these are people who have lived experience of addiction and recovery, whether their own or that of being a family member or loved one, a caretaker of someone with a substance use challenge. They help to move people through the stages of the recovery journey that we talked about earlier. And there is a credential here in New Jersey. There's national credentials as well, but here it's the certified peer recovery specialist. And peer recovery specialists, there's a lot of data to support that there are many positive outcomes associated with adding peers to the continuum of support someone is able to access. Less likely to engage with the criminal justice system, better treatment engagement, retention, and relationships with treatment providers. Oftentimes, treatment providers who may not know a lot about the peer role are a little skeptical. What is this? Not a lot of training. Is that a boundary violation to talk about your recovery, to talk about your lived experience? But really, clinical services in coordination with peer services in a collaborative fashion has some really positive outcomes, better than treatment alone. Reductions in use, greater housing stability, so much good comes from peer recovery specialists being involved in someone's recovery. Here in New Jersey, there are a number of initiatives, and again, more every day. It's exciting to see the growth in the different services that are available to folks with substance use challenges in the state. I'll just highlight a few. So I mentioned recovery community centers. This is a safe space for people in recovery to come to access different types of self-help meetings. Again, not just 12-step, but a variety of recovery support programs to engage with a peer, to participate in social activities that are geared towards the recovery community. And these are available in every county in the state. They're peer-run, and they are free to access. There's no charge and no cumbersome eligibility requirements. Recovery high schools, there are 3 recovery high schools here in the state. Prevention Links is incredibly proud to have been the first recovery high school here in New Jersey, and we opened back in 2015. And so this is a regular high school. Students are working towards their diploma, but they are engaged in a community of support where they're working with a peer recovery mentor, a counselor, along with their teachers, their principals, and others, and everybody's working together to help them in their dual goal of getting to graduation and moving on to whatever's next for them, whether that's college or trade school or the workforce, and sustaining their recovery at the same time. And there are also programs around the state that are focused on supporting family members. Oftentimes, a loved one is ready for help before the person with the substance use issue is. And oftentimes, providers are at a loss. So let's say my son or daughter is struggling with addiction, and I call a treatment program and I say, I don't know how to help them. And they say, when they're ready, call us back. That's not enough. We need to be able to equip family members and loved ones with the tools and resources they need to help be a part of the change process and move their loved one towards help-seeking behavior. So there's a model called CRAFT, Community Reinforcement and Family Training. And throughout the state, there are agencies that are trained to support individuals in helping their loved one learn those skills, learning those skills so that they can help their loved one. A big piece of that is learning how to care for themselves as the family member or loved one, because so often when someone in our life is struggling with addiction or any other health condition, we might put our own well-being on hold to support them. And so self-care is a big piece of how we help families help themselves and help their loved ones. I don't have time to talk about all of these, but I will be here, and maybe during the dialogue we'll talk more about some of them. So many different programs out there that can be beneficial, and I'll let you know where you can find directories as well. So I just want to end on this note, because in all likelihood, some of us here, at this convening have a loved one who's struggling and might not know exactly the best way to help. First, we have to remember that substance use disorder is treatable. There are effective treatments out there and more all the time. We can engage in conversations that are not filled with anger, that are not filled with guilt and shame with our loved one who is engaged in substance use. We can be open with them, we can support them and show compassion through the process of navigating what can be very complicated systems to access services. But to be able to show up in that way, we have to be informed, we have to find our own resources, and as I said, they are out there. And we also have to be very intentional about seeking support for ourselves as we support our loved ones. So that is what I have for you all for now, and I have my contact information here. I would love to hear from you all. nj-cars.org has a resource map where you can find local programs like the ones that I was talking about, recovery support programs, and if you have any trouble finding a program that you need, I'd be happy to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Wow, I can't wait to engage in the question and answers. Thank you so much, Morgan. It's kind of wild, huh? So it's my privilege to now introduce Father Thomas Hoar. Father Tom entered the Society of St. Edmund in June of 1971. He professed religious vows in August in 72 and was a student at St. Michael's College and graduated with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in 1974. In 1977, he received his, sorry, I got distracted when I saw you, but I apologize. He received his Master's of Divinity from the University of St. Michael's College in Toronto, Ontario. In 78, he received a Master's of Arts degree in Religion and Religious Education from Fordham University. And in June 1985, Father Tom received his PhD in Higher Education Administration from Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan. Father Tom was ordained to the priesthood on May 13, 1978. And in 1980, Father Tom became a trustee of his alma mater, St. Michael's College. And from 85 to 87, he served as the Vice President of Student Affairs at Christian Brothers University in Memphis, Tennessee. In 1993, he finally arrived at St. Edmund's Retreat in Mystic, Connecticut, where he is currently and continues to reside. While here at St. Edmund's Retreat, Father Tom has been the Retreat Director of Development of Enders Island, and from 2003 to the present is the President of St. Edmund's Retreat. Father Tom established the St. Michael's Institute of Sacred Art and the St. Maximilian Kolb Recovery Residence during his time here, and he is chaplain of the U.S. Naval Submarine Base in Groton, Connecticut. Father Tom received his Doctor of Philosophy and Humanities from the program in Culture and Technology at Savoy Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island, and received his first doctoral degree in 1987 from Michigan State University in Student Development, Higher Education Administration. In 2015, Father Tom became a member of the Board of Advisors for the Collegiate Recovery Program at Texas Tech University, and we are very welcome to have him here to speak with you today.
Hi, my name's Tom, and I'm an alcoholic. That's much more important than this stuff. I've always been impressed by the way New Jersey has approached recovery and the things that you have been leaders in the nation, particularly the collegiate recovery communities. There are now somewhere between 130 and 150 colleges and universities around the country that have collegiate recovery programs supporting people in their academic pursuits, supporting them in their recovery. And the first one in the country was at Rutgers. And these folks have an intimate relationship with that. I come from a whole different approach. I think that what we're doing to help people who are addicted is admirable, but I think we're missing the underlying issues, and that is a real shift in our society. The breakdown of the family, the kind of sidelining of God in our lives and in our communities, a notion that mental health is something to be ashamed of and kind of pushed to the side. And I think these are some of the underlying causes of the rise in addiction. In 1937, Dr. Bob Smith and Bill Wilson met in Akron, Ohio. And what they gave birth to is known as Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. In 1939, the book Alcoholics Anonymous was published by the first 100 people in that program. And it lays out a program of coming to grips with the problem, the willingness to surrender, the willingness to actively engage in the restoration of the past, and bringing that to healing, and then a commitment to live a healthy, balanced, joyful, peace-filled life. And I think one of the concerns I have with harm reduction is that it doesn't get down to the underlying issues that people are struggling with. I work with, especially with young men who are in early recovery. They come to Enders Island after they have gone through a detox and a rehab program for at least 30 days. And they'll come and spend anywhere from a semester to 3 years with us. And we help them to develop the skills to live a healthy, balanced, joyful, peaceful, prayerful life. Many of them either return to school, enter school. We help them find a vocation as far as plumbers, electricians, masonry workers, graduate schools, return to their professional life. And we have about, after 5 years, we have about 87% success rate. But we keep our community small. It's based in 12-step recovery, the principles of the 12 steps. And it also helps to the fellows come to grips with the underlying traumas and issues. And two of the issues that I think I keep hearing about are abandonment and being exploited sexually. I'm absolutely amazed at the number of young men, seminarians, priests that we deal with who were sexually traumatized as children. Not by priests, but by family members and family acquaintances. I thought that was something that you read about in the books, but I'd say 90% of the folks that have entered into our recovery program over the past 10 years have been sexually abused or abandoned. And one of the issues of abandonment is the one-parent family. I dealt with a priest who was 56 years old. He was adopted by a very loving couple. But he was not able to get over the notion that he was abandoned, that people were willing to give him away because he wasn't good enough. And those are the issues that I think a lot of times in treatment programs are really not dealt with. Most treatment programs, initial treatment are short-lived, 30 days, 45 days. And then have a good life, go to meetings, don't drink, don't use, be good. And it doesn't always work. I think the recidivism rate is probably up in the 75 to 80% at least, people going back. We had a young man who came to us. He had gone to 12 rehabs, or 12 detoxes, 12 rehabs, 12 sober houses, and he was on this kind of cycle. And there are for-profit programs out there that they do better when you keep coming back. They love to see the returns. And so something is broken in that system. And I think what it is we're treating addiction as a disease that can be fixed with a short-term intervention. It's a chronic disease that has to be supported for a lifetime. I'm 34 years sober, and I still go to AA meetings. And so the whole notion of harm reduction and abstinence is a slippery slope. I understand the principles of harm reduction. At least we can get people off the streets. We can get people back into some semblance of fitting into society. But we don't want to spend the money or the time in helping people deal with the underlying issues and then help them develop the habits of healthy, balanced living. The 12 steps, the first 3, I'm powerless over my addiction. I'm powerless over alcohol. If alcohol's in my life is unmanageable. The second is, I came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. And the third one is, made the decision to turn my life and my will over to the care of God as I understand Him. Those are the first 3 steps that prepare someone for a life of recovery and to enter into the whole process of healing and restoration. But they're not easy steps. Confronting the fact that my life is just a mess when I use alcohol, drugs, or one of the process addictions. And we're coming to find out that the process addictions are as destructive in people's lives as the substance addictions. Process addictions are gambling, gaming, pornography, being addicted to the internet, anything that we use to kind of ease our dis-ease with living in a world that is at times, for all of us, chaotic. And so coming to the realization that, when I'm buying $750 a week on scratch-off tickets, that makes my life unmanageable. Or if I'm drinking, 12 beers a night, and I can't get up and go to work, I become disinterested in anything else but getting that nightly fix. Whatever it is that is in my life that is causing me not to live that healthy, balanced, joyful, peaceful life, coming to grips with saying, I need help. My life is really, really unmanageable. And that's not always an easy process to come to. But when we come to it and we say, I am powerless over this, then I move to the second step, which is, came to believe that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. The interesting thing is, this is the only time in the steps that the whole notion of higher power is used. A power greater than myself, God. And people will skip over the second step. Oh yeah, I believe in God. Yeah. I was raised a Catholic. I used to go to church when I was a kid. But what is my relationship with God now? Who is God in my life, and what does God want for me? Coming to the realization that God cares for me. I'm created in His image and after His own likeness. I'm beloved by the Father. People have a hard time with that. I was 10 years a priest and had to struggle with that. When I came to believe that I could tell you how much God loved you, but coming to believe that He had any care for me was a difficult thing. And you have to come to some understanding of who God is, what my relationship is or could be, before, in the third step, make the decision to turn my life and my will over the care of God, as I understand Him. And that parathento phrase, as I understand Him, was in the first 100 folks. They used that so Christians and Jews and Hindus and Buddhists could use these steps, to use the steps where God becomes an important part of the healing process. It doesn't mean that you have to live your life perfectly. It means that you turn your life over and care over to your will over to the care of God, that I'm willing to let go of what I want, what I think, and try to come to understand what God is asking of me and what God is willing to give me and how God is willing to help me. Made that decision. And then the fourth and the fifth step, for those of us that are Catholic, will understand it as an examination of conscience and confession. The fourth step is make a fearless inventory, a thorough, fearless, moral inventory of my life. What are the things that I've done well? What are things that I've done that have caused other people harm or myself harm? And then the fifth step is admit to myself, to God, and another human person the exact nature of my wrongs. When we say out loud to someone else, this is what I have done, and they don't go screaming out of the room, it's a freeing. I can remember writing my fourth and then doing my fifth step of how it felt like a 10-ton weight had been taken from my shoulders. And then the sixth and seventh step is becoming ready and asking God to take my character defects away from me, to bring healing. And then the eighth and ninth are me helping to bring healing to the people I have harmed. Coming to recognize that my actions or inactions have caused others hurt. And being willing to make amends for that. And sometimes the amends has to be private and quiet. You know, have to make an amends to somebody who's dead, or make an amends to someone. And if I told them what it was about, it would cause them more hurt and pain. We make amends without causing more harm. And the 10th step is to make an inventory every day of what the day has been like. What have I done well? What have I done poorly in? Have I hurt anybody? And if I've hurt someone, to quickly make amends for that as soon as possible. The 11th step is increase my conscious contact with God through prayer and meditation as I understand God. But we have to be grounded in something. A lot of people will say, well, I'm spiritual. I don't go to church. I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. And I said, that's wonderful. You're spiritual. I'll tell you this. There are a lot of spirits out there that want to have a relationship with you, and the majority of them don't live in heaven. I work as an exorcist, so I've seen it. They love to have a relationship with you. But in the 12-step community, we have the big book, which is the original text, Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have the good book. And they have to go together. There has to be a vibrant life of faith and prayer to sustain the us on the road to recovery. And then the 12th step is, having had a spiritual awakening through these steps, I'm committed not only to live them, but to share them. And the best way to share them is to live a healthy, sober, joyful, peace-filled life, which is a challenge. And there are many, many support groups out there. But the one that has worked consistently since 1939 are the 12 steps. Now, we've seen the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous, Heroin Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and there's other permeations of it. But they all come around the same principles. That I'm broken, God loves me, and here's the way of healing and hope. And it's amazing how open people are to help. But when people go into a 12-step meeting for the first time, it's frightening. And then you become overwhelmed by the wonderful people who reach out to you and welcome you and tell you that they'll support you. Because it's about those relationships. It's about having healthy relationships. And if we don't have them in our families, if we have been traumatized or a sense of abandonment, or we're suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome, whatever it is that is the underlying issue, when we get to be living that balanced, healthy, holy life, then we can deal with the traumas. So when folks come to Enders Island, to our community, the first thing we do is we help them remain sober, whether it's from drugs, alcohol, sex, pornography, gambling, gaming, whatever it is, to stay healthy, sober, balanced. And then invite them and help them and guide them to bring the trauma to healing. Because a lot of times the trauma makes someone feel inadequate, unlovable, makes them feel like they don't belong. They feel like they're always kind of detached, that there's an emptiness in their lives, and they try to fill that emptiness with whatever will go in. And the addiction will anesthetize the pain for a period, but addiction is a devolving, destroying process. Ultimately, it will lead you to a life of misery and death. They say that, I'm trying to think of the exact words of it, that you're either living sober or you are in an institution or you're in the grave. They say it better than that. But the hope that the 12-step community brings is a hope that can be nourished and sustained over a period of time through that mutual support and the recognition that I'm not alone. Because so many times people who are suffering with severe addiction feel isolated. They'll say to you, I feel alone in a room of 100 people. No, they don't fit in. And they have to use their substance in order to have any type of social interaction. Remember, I was a vice president of a college, right? And I'd have to go to trustee meetings and trustee events and fundraising events. And they'd always have open bars, and for an alcoholic, that's a great thing, right? But I also knew that I had to control it. So I would put a swizzle stick in my breast pocket in my suit, so that I never had more than two or three swizzle sticks in my pocket. And then afterwards, I'd go back to my room and relax, and then I could have a drink the way I wanted to have a drink. And we play those games with ourselves. And those of you who are going to go into the helping professions, you have to, and if you're not an addict or recovering addict, you have to understand the mindset, the trauma. I have a friend that's a social worker, a clinical social worker, and he has 120 case files. And he says, the group of folks I work for, I'm expected to see 20 people or more a day. How do you really help? So one of the problems, as I said before, is a societal problem. We don't want to fund or come to grips with what mental illness is and all of its different permutations. Because it's that thing that nobody really wants to talk about, because in the past, if you had a person struggling with mental illness, you kept them in the house in the back room because you didn't want people to know that this was in the family. I hope soon that we'll become dissuaded about those thoughts, and we'll come to really deal with mental illness in a healthy way so that it doesn't stigmatize. It's amazing the amount of people who go through daily life trapped in not only addiction, but depression and mental illness that's untreated. And those of us who are in the helping professions have a real opportunity to make a difference by walking with these people, but it's you have to do it because of the love that you have for God's people, not because it's a job. And you have to work to become strong in this journey, because you can be overwhelmed. You can really be overwhelmed and just become a bureaucrat that does one file and then picks up the next one and sees people only through their files and not to see them as persons. Having the accompaniment, having someone treat me as a human being is vitally important. It's probably fundamental to the whole process of healing and recovery. There's a difference between being sober and living the life of recovery. Sober is an absence of the addictive substance or process. Recovery is living that balanced, healthy, holy, joyful, peaceful life. And people will stumble and fall. They'll have relapses, but we can't give up on them. We can't give up. I always remind folks that Jesus on the way to Calvary fell 3 times, but he kept getting up and continuing the journey, and he had help. Simon of Cyrene helped him carry his cross. We are like Simon of Cyrene, helping people carry the cross of their addiction or their mental illness or their feeling of hopelessness. St. Paul says, persevere in adversity, rejoice in hope.
Thank you so much. This is really compelling. So before we have lunch at 12, we're going to entertain some questions. It is being recorded, so if you have a question, please stand up and speak in the mic, and you guys can use that mic. So I'm just going to start while you guys think about your questions. You both talked about the importance of community for health and recovery. Could you talk a little bit, since the title of our program is about hope, and our academy really focuses on resilience. Can you talk about the role of hope and resilience in the recovery process?
We have to give people hope.
Wait, hold on one second.
We have to find opportunities to give people hope where they have no hope. We have to help them through community, through relationships, to understand that they have value, that they have opportunities. Have to be very honest with them and say, this ain't easy. Living that healthy, balanced, joyful, peaceful life ain't easy. But it's possible because your brothers, your sisters will walk with you, and when it becomes too heavy, too overwhelming, we'll help you bear that and give them opportunities where they can succeed. For example, we had one fellow from New Jersey who came to us, and he wanted nothing to do with school. And I always make the guys go to the community college and take a class in reading, writing, and reasoning. And I don't want to do that. I said, I don't care. You're going to do it. And this fellow finished his associate degree with a 4.0, got into Columbia, and graduated with a 8.75 GPA. He wanted nothing to do with school because he'd been told over and over again, you can't do that. And his addiction reaffirmed that.
So there is a researcher that I follow, Dr. John Kelly, who really studies the science of recovery. And I listened to one of his talks recently where he talked about what the brain is like for that first year of recovery. And we watched it, the Academy group and I watched it together. And it talks about the part of our brain, the chemical in our brain that makes us feel good when we cross a task off of our checklist or do something that moves us in a positive direction, that chemical is in short supply for at least the first year of recovery. And at the same time, we are very prone to get agitated and activated in a negative way for that first year of recovery. So it's very easy to spiral and spin into everything is terrible in this moment during those early stages of the recovery journey, like on a chemical level. So when we have people around us who know what that's like, but they're on the other side of it and they're in a place of stability and where they see and are experiencing that new reality of a positive life experience, stability, they can be that vision of hope, and being able to talk about that with someone who's in that moment in a way that only we know because we've been there, to be able to meet someone with that type of compassion, but also let them know that it does get better truly. That is the hope that sparks someone to take the next step, and in taking that next step, they're able to build the resilience that they need. And each time that they do take that step, they become more resilient, and that is how, for many, that the recovery process, grows over time, and probably part of how the brain, heals itself and rewires itself along the recovery pathway. So, I'm not a scientist. I obviously didn't explain that very well, but I think it's helpful to know that, this isn't just, our own experiences, although experience is vitally important, that we're starting to understand why things happen the way they do for people with substance use challenges.
Thank you so much. Thank you for talking about the brain. Okay, Father Lucy.
Thank you so much. So, I think one of the greatest intellectuals of the 20th century was Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist, neurologist, who suffered so much the Nazis killed his wife and his parents and many of his loved ones. And he was able to live a life of hope, of healing, and help so many people, in the decades after the Shoah. And one of the things I like most about his thought is there are so many parallels with the Catholic view of the human person. And Frankl talks about the somatic dimension, the body, the psychological, the mind, but also the noetic, the spiritual core of the person. And throughout his writings, he makes reference to the fact that even though we can have a disease of the mind, a disease of the body, that spiritual core is always intact, and it can be a resource for the healing of the mind and of the body. And I was wondering if maybe both of you could speak briefly about what you've seen in your work and your ministry about drawing on spiritual resources to ultimately heal the whole person.
I'm sure you'll have more to say on the topic. So I think, one thing that is very important to me when I'm working with individuals in the recovery process is to acknowledge how self-defined spirituality is, and that, it may take some time before someone is able to recognize the role of spirituality in their life for what it is, even though it's present with them, to your point. So, for some, they lead with, I draw strength from my faith. I draw strength from God. I draw strength from my spirit. And that is an asset that we build upon as counselors, as peer recovery specialists, and, really try to center that source of strength in this person's treatment, in their recovery support process. So, that's the best case scenario. For others, it's something, like I said, that develops over time, that there may be some, you spoke about trauma, Father Tom, that there may be some either real trauma that, has created some sort of barrier to accessing that part of their life, or, just a general perception that that's not for me. I wasn't raised, and that was my experience. I wasn't raised with any particular religion. I found my own spiritual path, through my recovery journey. And I think that's often the case for people too. So the most important thing from my perspective is that we're able to meet people where they are as it relates to spirituality, and help them to find their own way in that regard.
When God is in someone's life, there is a spark of hope. So when I'm chatting with somebody who is in early recovery, and they tell me that they're spiritual, not religious, I suggest to them that our best thinking gets us to where we are. And in the 12-step communities, you'll hear about stinking thinking. I can do it my way. And I suggest that they return to the faith community of their childhood and begin to listen differently. I remember I was leading an 11-step retreat in Massachusetts, and on Saturday night they had a speaker, and he was 35 years sober. He was an Irish Catholic fellow from South Boston, and if you're a Bostonian, you know what that means, right? And he said, as a kid, when the priests and the nuns were talking about God, they were talking about a loving God, but what I heard was that God's going to squash me, because how bad I am. And it wasn't until he came into recovery that he rediscovered that what they were trying to tell them is how much God cared for them, and that God wanted a relationship with them. We have fellows that come to our community who are atheists, agnostics, Baptists, Catholics, Jews, Hindus, and I tell everybody the same thing. Go back to your spiritual roots, because just as the 12-step community guides us along the path of recovery, so faith communities can guide us along the way of spiritual renewal and healing. I don't know anyone who has long-term recovery that doesn't have a faith life. And I've met lots and lots of people in recovery. And I don't get upset when somebody stumbles and falls, has a relapse. Try to help them get up again and continue the journey. In some recovery programs, if you have a relapse, they kick you out. The other thing that's, I think, difficult is many of the good rehab places are restricted by too much bureaucracy and the insurance companies. Insurance companies don't want to pay for long-term programs. And it's the long-term programs and support that really increases the ability to live that healthy, balanced, sober, joyful, peaceful life. And so many of them are afraid to talk about God. If I go to a meeting and they don't know who I am, like when I'm traveling, and I talk about God, you can get shut down or shouted down because don't impose your faith on us. We'll impose our unbelief on you. And I think we have to realize that to live that healthy, balanced life, we have to be body, mind, and spirit have to be dealt with. Body and mind, okay. But when you bring God into it, a lot of people become very uncomfortable.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions? Please just approach the mic. And just introduce yourself too, please.
Hi, my name is Joanne Simon, and I have a son who's in addiction. And he was brought up Catholic, but he said, God's not helping him. God's not helping him, so he doesn't really, feel he can turn to God. What can I say?
It might be helping you in ways that you don't recognize right now.
Can you say that again?
You might suggest to him that God is helping you in ways that you may not be able to recognize right now. But be willing, be trustful, and, if he wants to talk to somebody, I'll give you my card.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for your presentation. I personally felt impacted by hearing all of the information. And as someone who currently has relatives and also past loved ones who's dealt with these severe addictions, how would you differentiate the act of being an enabler versus being a loving person and wanting, if you understand what I mean?
I totally get the question.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you,
the
Daisy.
question and for sharing. I get it. It's not an easy question to answer, right? So, in the craft model that I mentioned when I was speaking, we talk about the idea that enabling is an overused term, right? And that, when enabling comes from a place of the loved one, so let's say we're talking about, it's me and my child, right? If I am accommodating his addiction in ways that feel dishonest to me, that feel inauthentic to me, that I'm going to live in guilt and shame over, you could call that enabling. If I'm taking steps to help my child be safe, if I'm taking steps to, encourage positive behaviors that other people might judge me for, that other people may not understand, that I wouldn't call enabling. But so often when we're in it and we haven't had any sort of time to kind of step back and process and understand our role in our loved one's life, we're just reacting in the moment. And so, I really encourage having that time and space, like I said, to take a step back and figure out, well, what am I and what am I not okay with? What are the boundaries, in my relationship with my child who's struggling? And what steps am I not willing to take? and being honest with them about those boundaries, but leaving the judgment piece aside as it relates to other people, because I think that's oftentimes where the emotional charge of the enabling concept comes in, is what other people think, and it's personal. It's between you and your loved one. I hope that helps. Would you like to add?
I would look for some support in Al-Anon, which is a 12-step program for family members of folks in active addiction. Could be helpful. But I think you have to be careful that there's no one answer and there's no right way. You have to come to a loving decision that I may have to draw a boundary and say, if you do this or continue to live this way, especially if it's a child and there are other children in the mix, you might have to say you're going to have to find some other place to live. But if you say that, then you have to follow through. Because addicts and alcoholics are wonderful manipulators. And they have manipulated themselves and the people around them just for survival. So it's very difficult because your heart is breaking, and yet you want to do the right thing. So I would reach out to folks in Al-Anon or other families that have struggled with this for support. And it's what might work in one situation might not work in another, but at least when you're talking with those folks, they can give you ideas and also to support you, because you need as much support as the addicted person.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
My name is John Schmunk. I'm a candidate for the Permanent Diaconate Program, graduate student in theology here and participating in the academy. So the parish that I am presently in and that I will be serving in the future is just a small middle-class parish. And this is my impression of this, the public health system provides a very robust program for particularly marginalized communities where a lot of people are unhoused and a lot of people don't have insurance and struggle with a variety of different issues. And there are programs there to deal with the acute phases of addiction, but then also step down and continuing recovery. On the other end of the spectrum, there are expensive resources like residential recovery programs. But for the typical person in a small middle class residential community, they're housed, they have jobs, but they're afraid of the stigma attached to addiction at their job or with their families and in the community. They can't seek out necessarily residential programs because they can't leave their jobs or they can't afford it. And it sort of seems like that type of community is sort of in between. Is there a gap? Am I missing something? Is there a gap there? And what are the resources that could be recommended for that?
Great question.
Oh, there's very much a gap. When people ask how much does it cost to come to our program, I tell them that our costs run about $10,000 a month, but we never let money be a boundary. We don't take insurance because you take insurance, then you have to do things their way. So we need more nonprofit programs that can help people without insurance and are not, limited to 30 days or 60 days. So the majority of the people that come to us pay nothing. They pay nothing because their families have either expended all of their resources trying to get their son healthy, or the fellow is out on his own and has nothing. You know? Like that fellow I mentioned that was in 12 rehabs, 12 detoxes, 12 rehabs, 12, those were all owned by the same people. So when you went out into the sober house, if you slipped, they sent you back to detox and then rehab, and and it was just a vicious cycle for money. We have to find a way, and I think it's in the nonprofit realm where we're going to find it to provide for the needs of the addicted and those seeking recovery without counting the cost. So we don't take government money, we don't even take insurance, but we're very much dependent upon the generosity of others.
I would just add that we have to give people options because the barriers are different for everyone, as you're describing, even within these kind of middle class. Like, not everybody within the middle class has the same obstacles to accessing treatment. And so cost, of course, is the one we think of the most, but there's so many other challenges. And you raised the issue of leaving work. I think about, childcare if I have young children. And so there are new models that kind of move away from this notion that you have to be removed from your life for a period of time. Now, that works for many people. I mean, programs like the one that you're describing, programs like the ones that I was able to benefit from, where you can kind of take a break from life for 30, 60, 90 days, for some people a year, longer, can be very beneficial, but for many it's not practical. For me, I was able to do that because I was a college dropout and I had adequate insurance and I didn't really have a lot else going on, and I had the resources to go and the familial support. But not, at a different time in my life, it wouldn't have been possible. And so, models like office-based addiction treatment, where the same doctor that you go to look at your heart health and your, every other type of health, can also talk to you about behavioral health, can also prescribe medications that can assist someone with withdrawal management and with sustained medication management of their addiction for the appropriate period of time. And while those models may not be as robust, and while those models may not create the same opportunities to do that spiritual work, that has to kind of be braided in through community-based resources and other providers, that those models remove barriers for a lot of people who may not access any type of treatment or services otherwise.
Thank you.
That was a great question. Thank you very much. And both of you had mentioned sort of the continuum of care and having options. So I think that addresses that too. Anything else? Okay. I think we're ready for lunch, and I want to really profoundly thank our guests for being here and sharing your wisdom and your experience with us. And thank you for joining us.